That is just absolutely outrageous. This one, I guess, will be a 1954 Vespa 125. Absolutely incredible. You'll tell that it's a 125. We've got gear cables here. This was introduced in about 1952, and was a great improvement on the old rod mechanism, which didn't really function particularly well. Little extras that weren't fitted as standard would be things like a speedo here. Now this little speedo with the Vespa logo on it is really very rare, and it's a lovely little extra if you're going to restore a bike. This is the sort of thing that you really want to put on there, and is as rare as hen's teeth. You just don't find them anymore. You look at the wider frame. You look inside here. We've got the toolbox there with the carburettor inside it. Absolutely incredible machines, and with the headlamp low. Now this machine was produced in England by Douglas, but because of legal regulations, the headlamp had to be moved up to here. This one would have been known as a GL or a GL2. This one next to it is a Series 1 GS160. Now, yeah, if you're watching this, you'll be thinking, great, I'd love this machine, but it is really very expensive. And Italy isn't the sort of place to buy these things anymore. You're talking about £1,200 for something like this. It's complete, but you can get that sort of deal in England. Sometimes you're better off actually buying one that's already restored for a couple of £1,000s. It's going to cost you 800 to do one anyway, but this is a lovely example to find. And more importantly, a lot of the British models you find they're rusted out underneath with the weather. You come to Italy and you do find the rust-free examples. Things to look out for here: straight mud guards, straight leg shields. You look at the switch here and that automatically tells you straight away that it's a GS160. The classic mod bubbles at the back. It looked great in chrome in the 1960s. And this is about a 1962 model. And in 1962 you had all the mods riding around up and down the seafronts, fighting with the bikers and doing their things, and they were getting there on things like this: cheap, affordable transport. Other things to look out for, things like brake shoes. You go through these, you can find yourself the old Vespa brake shoes that differ a little bit in diameter, and the reproductions that you get just don't quite do the job. Carburettors, Vespa 50 carburettor, no use whatsoever. Now this is a real rarity. You don't come across these very often. Never made in Britain, never imported into Britain. This is a Vespa 98. It's a later model. We've got the headlamp on the front mudguard, slightly further forward, slightly smaller. If you look here, we've got the gear change mechanism. It's not done by cables. It's actually done by rod linkages. And on the later models, we actually had a protective bar here, to stop the gear change mechanisms being interfered with. This one, the rods actually run through the frame. So I would imagine this one's about a late 1948, early 49. The chrome on it as well. Looking at the handlebars, it looks very good. There's a slight little bit of weathering there, but it looks like ancient weathering. The original chrome was of particularly good quality, and I would suspect that these handlebars haven't actually been re-chromed. A GS150 engine. Absolutely amazing. All complete, carburettor, kickstarts on there, all the difficult bits to get hold of. I like this. Got the accessory speedo here. This is about a 1953. It's got a couple of little dents in there. She's been resprayed, larger headlamp. But the thing that gets me about this one, which is great, are all these little accessories. A lot of these you just cannot get. We got one on the headlamp there, unoriginal horn. Got a more modern one on there, wide frame again. But if we look at the exhaust over here, we've got this strange motorcycle contraption, beautifully chromed. Made in France, I believe. Lovely side panel trims, can't get hold of these for love nor money. Round at the back here, we've got a number plate holder, which is a lovely little extra to have. I like the way that these things stick out at the back. Little nudge bar at the back as well. Beautiful little bike. This is exactly the sort of thing that I just love riding around on. It's got the steering lock key. That's quite nice. You find that in England, you buy bikes, they're always missing the steering lock key. In Italy, they always seem to have them. I have no idea why. What's this one? Oh, this is the Virgin Mary. Something you find on loads of bikes here. In fact, there you go. We've got the St. Christopher. Loads of bikes have St. Christophers fitted to them. I think that's a fantastic touch, really. If ever I buy a bike that's got one on there, I leave it on there. It's good luck for the customer. Right, This is a carburettor that I need for one of my bikes back in England. It's a GS160 carburettor. Now, I've got no carburettor at all, and the chances of finding one is just an absolute needle in a haystack search in England. But I've managed to find this one here. It's an S127 Dell'Orto. It's for the Mark 1 GS, or the Series 1 GS160, but I need this carburettor. I'm really chuffed that I found it, and I'm just about to negotiate the price. A pair of Sprint Veloces. Absolutely fantastic machines. Was it a step up from the GL that we saw earlier? Was it these ones have got triple transfer ports? Was it means that the miles per gallon goes down, but the speed is about 20 kilometers per hour more? Absolutely fantastic. These will be about late 1960s. This one's slightly earlier because it has the trapezoidal headlamp on there. This one, the later one, we've got the Rally headlamp on there. Nice big headlamp, plenty of light, can see where you're going, makes a change. Certainly a step in the right direction. This is a lovely engine sound. The guy who owns this bike's just come over, second kick, she starts up, she ticks over, there's no mucking about. You don't have to worry about oil spills or anything like that.
Registered 1961. It's got quite a lot of period stuff on it. It's got a 58 headlamp on the mudguard, which is wired up to the main beam. Originally in the late 50s, it was the only form of lighting to what they used to call a rod model. No headlight at the top, light basically on the mudguard, and wires for the cables on the top. I've put my own bits and pieces on it, obviously, because it is a Douglas. I put a side step on it, which is early 60s, which the young ladies, if they dared to sit side saddle in Italy, and they put their feet on there, and so it goes like that. But I wouldn't fancy driving side saddle through the town, especially in Italy. But that's it generally. It's got original. It's got original text disc on at the moment. So we've got 2 text discs, which is very rare. In 1961, which sees 17 and sixpence, which is roughly 75 pence to you lot. That's how much it was originally. And it's about the only thing that's isn't any dearer than it is today, because it's a historic vehicle. It don't cost me anything now. What we used to do in the 60s, they didn't have white wall tyres, so we actually used to paint them every week with hand brush, and then do them around like that, and then go out to rallies. What I've done because of for reliability, I've put a brand new T5 engine in, which is a brand new Vespa engine, which fitted in perfectly, and I put the original kickstart back, of course. So I get the styling and the reliability as well. So I get the best of both worlds, which is what it's all about at the end of the day. We've done about 100 miles getting here today. As I say, I use it for work if it's nice, but it doesn't stay hidden away. It's, it's out and about everywhere. And where I live now in Bedford, everyone sees it around, so it's all right.
My name's Nigel Cox, and I've got the world's biggest collection of Lambretta scooters. Let me show you around. Right, this all started, I think, back in about 1986, when, like everybody, I saw an SX200, which was a scooter that I really wanted, and that what started me going. But as we walk around, I'll show you some of the scooters. This one here, TB175 Series 3, this is a classic scooter with all the mod accessories on it. And this is a sort of era that I remember back in 67, people had the scooters, and then you bought bits, mirrors, lights and everything, and every spare bit of money you had. Moving on to this, another classic scooter, TB200. This is very nice condition. This is actually done less than 5,000 miles. It's completely original, and I've not seen a nicer one of these. Right, moving on from that, this is still in the 70s now, or the late 60s, 70s. We've got the Vega or the Luna range. This is a range of sort of step-through scooters. Today they look fairly fashionable, but in the time when they was being sold new, in fact they were sold for £99. So really, Lambretta lost a lot of money on these scooters. Had they been around now today, I think they may have sold. Now, you'll see 2 scooters here, the green and the brown one. These are the Model A model, or the 125M. This is how Lambretta started, and these are actually designed just after the war. 1944 was a prototype, and they actually came onto sale in 1947. And although the scooters have got tiny 7-inch wheels, they've got a 3-speed gearbox with a foot gear change. It's very unusual. It's the only Lambretta that had that. No suspension. They had rubber bushes in the front, and the back was just solid, and they just relied on the tyres. But basically, this was just to get people moving after the war. They wanted to get the nation rolling again, and this is what happened. You had Piaggio, which was about 6 months before them in 1946, had already got a scooter, and this is what Lambretta came back. Like everything, anything new, they didn't keep this model for very long. In 1948, they brought out the B model. Similar looking scooter, although many things are different. You upgraded to 8-inch wheels. You now had a hand gear change like all the other Lambretta scooters. You had suspension now. You had suspension on the front, which was cantilever, and you had a torsion arm suspension or a bush suspension on the rear. All these are 125cc scooters, top speed of 40-45 mile an hour. Moving on from that, you had the Model C, which was an open model again, bearing in mind scooters up into this era, 1950, hadn't really come into the UK then. A few private ones had come in. It wasn't until 51, so they were a warm climate. However, if I can just take you over to this one here, not restored yet, but original. This is an LC, so this is the same model, but a clothed version. This has got panels, leg shields, but the mechanics, the engine, the forks and everything are the same. From the C, they went to a D model. This again had torsion suspension with basically that is a thick bar of about 1/2 inch in diameter with a spline either end. And this, as it went up and down, the bar actually twisted and pivoted, and that was the suspension on it. This is a 125 Model D. They had a 150 Model D. This is 52. This one's 57. This is still in the mid to late 50s. Also in that era, 53, 54, they had the E model and the F model. These two models never came into the UK. Those scooters were now being sold in England. They didn't import the E and the F model because with our climate, we wasn't very nice. Now at the same time, we're going to cross over and miss these ones out for a second because I just want to show you some other models. They had the whole range of scooters, which were the LDs then, which are now very similar to these open models and the same mechanics, but they were closed scooters with panels with leg shields. Now they made the LD from 52 through to 58, 59. I'll show you the last Italian one, but next to it was interesting. This one here is a French LD made in Troyes in France. This was made in 59-60, and the reason we had these in the UK is because Lambretta concessionaires had sold their quota of Italian scooters and there was no more. So sales were booming in that era and they were looking to get other scooters, and this is why it came into the country.
I always wanted one, but my dad wouldn't let me have one, especially when I was living at home.
£25 a week, I worked 8 weeks for it, £200 I paid for Lambretta, GP 200.
Left home when I was 22 and a half, couldn't afford one then. So as you do, you just get on with life. Still being a mod, doing the thing, borrowing your mate's scooter or going on the back whenever you could. And eventually the time came along, took up driving instead. But then when the money came in, I went straight for this. So I had to find the one I really wanted though. You know, I wanted one the typical mod fashion. And then it was to buy the number plate to go with it. That was the essential. Top it off because I'm a really big Who fan. And most people know it around here. So, but yeah.
1978 was the first time I saw a scooter. That was in Telford. It was a Vespa 50. It wasn't much to look at, but that's my first recollection of a scooter.
Yeah, I was 16, just bought a brand new Vespa, well, so about 6 months old, PK50, rough old thing. But...
There was a lad in town I used to see dressed up as a skinhead, skunking around town. You'd be like, oh, hello, young man. And I think he had a Lambretta of some description. I didn't have a clue what it was at the time. But he took me to Margate, 92 I think, so I was quite a late starter. And that was it. Wanted my own straight away.
This is one of the last LD Italian scooters, but unlike the normal scooter, this is an electric start. Now they made 3 versions of the electric start, 1954 through to this one. But by the time they came to this one, which was the Mark III version, they were confident enough then to not even put a kickstart on it. And this is the plate here which would have had the kickstart. And how they worked this, where they had the clutch bell and the little starter motor ran here underneath, and it just literally drove the clutch bell. 2 6-volt batteries in the back to make 12-volt system. Same ignition as a car, so you had 12-volt lights, but you had them as soon as the engine, as soon as it was switched on and it charged the battery up. After that, they went very quickly to this model, which was in 1957 came out, which is a TV Series 1. Now this was a flagship for Lambretta. They were then competing with Vespa, which had Vespa GS 160. Now this came out as a 175 version. In fact, it was actually 170, but they called it a 175. It was a completely different design. You had now 4-speed gearbox. A big advantage because with these 3-speed LDs, you came to a hill and it was very, very difficult to, you know, if you had a steep incline, you were down to first, up to second, down to first. With a 4-speed gearbox, it was much better. Unfortunately, the layout of this engine wasn't that good. They had a centre kickstart with a very big spring that was wound like a clock, and that used to give a lot of trouble. So it was only brought out for a couple of years. And the 125 version, which you can see over there, and the 150 version, which is here, is restored, was the same looking scooter. Let me just show that. We have to excuse everything because we have a lot of parts here as well as the scooters. This was a 150. Although looking at it, it's very similar. The engine was completely different, and if I take a panel off to show you, what you had here was the basis of all the other engines that Lambretta made, even to the Spanish and the Indian. You had the main crankcase, which now had the gear cluster at the back, the crank drove from the front, and this was driven by a chain, and this was internal. You had an oil bath in it, and obviously this was a combination, whether it be a 125 or 150 200, all the Lambrettas had running on this engine now. And this came out, as I say, in 1958 for a Series 1. And they ran this only for a short time, because basically the problem they had with the Series 1 is, if you look at it, when you turned the steering, the headlight didn't. So as you went round a bend, you were turning around, but the headlight was facing. So they very quickly bought this. This was made for 18 months. And they very quickly bought it out. And then you had the Series 2 range, which you had, again, a 125, a 150 and a 175. The TV 175, which is, you know, the sort of top of the range version. You had shock absorbers on it, you had a more powerful engine, a dual seat. Still the same type of engine as the other one, the same 4-speed gearboxes, different ratios, but the same setup. That was the Series 2. This was made from sort of late 59 to 61, 62. Then after the Series 2s, you went to the Series 3s then, which was, they did a lot of what we call a slim style scooter. This is an LI 150 Series 3, and then they did at the same time they did a range of SX 150s, which are here, and an SX 125, and then again a very, very classic scooter you'll see on the top of this is an SX 200. Now that's a really classic scooter, very rare, very sought after. So they made the SX 200, then this went on till about 69, 70, and they bought out the GP range then, and again you had a 125, a 150, and this one, a unique scooter in itself. This is a GP 150, but there's only done about 276 miles from new. Everything's original on it, and this is the nicest example of original scooter I've ever seen. So rare to find one in this condition, and especially a British one. And then this would have finished the Lambrettas in the way Lambrettas were being built. This one here is a 200 GP, but an electronic. If you see the sticker on there, this was the electronic for the ignition, only for the points, not electric start or anything. Lambretta did that and finished in 58. So now this is a 200cc scooter. They modified the crankshaft, a bigger, thicker crankshaft flywheel with electronic ignition rather than points, a nice pickup and a contact. They also did a whole range of three-wheelers. They started off in 1948 with this one. It's very cluttered, but you can get the basic gist of it. This is an FB, which is basically the back end is the same as the B models, but the front, you steer the two front wheels. This is only a 125cc. As you can see, this was for ice creams, but you could carry a flat box or whatever. You can carry coal, whatever they wanted to do. So it was very, you know, in Italy, a lot of people used to potter around on these little things. Then this came out. This is an FD version. This is about 57, 58. And now the steering is just one wheel at the front like a conventional scooter, an axle at the back with a little drive shaft with 2 rubber donuts on it. And they made this in lots of versions with a cab or with not a cab, flatbeds and extensions, whatever. The name Lambro comes from the river Lambro, which actually runs through the site in Italy where the scooters were made. This one here is the 175cc. Got the same controls as a scooter. You've got a 4-speed gearbox, but you've now got a cab, you've got a windscreen wiper, so you've got doors, you've got weather protection. In Italy, most people took the doors off, it was an option. This is a different setup with a box, with 2 doors, and they had roller shutters or whatever. Now, one set of scooters I've missed out altogether is what they call the J range. Now, this was a range of scooters bought out in the mid-60s. It never really caught on in England. In fact, they were bought out for the ladies. But however, in Italy, they had the J50, which was the same body but a 50cc engine. Now, this was very popular because obviously 50cc mopeds were very cheap in Italy. In fact, they didn't even run a number plate on them. So a lot of people had a 50cc. So in Italy, they sold well. In this country, they didn't.
First thing I find when I get in here is the most amazing collection of Vespa literature. We've got the brand new Vespa Technica manuals over here, which is just absolutely incredible and amazing. And other stuff, you've got so much literature here. You've got Vespa from Milan to Tokyo, a little travel documentary, the workshop manuals, illustrated histories. A couple of the books are in English, most of them are in Italian. It really is worth learning in Italian. I actually learnt my Italian from a